Former Congressman Bob Ney was a Republican member of the House of Representatives as part of the Ohio delegation. He represented the 20th District of Ohio for many years. Is now a contributor to the Talk Radio News Service. He's also the author of the book Sideswiped, which talks at some length about John Boehner. And I couldn't think of anybody who would know this situation better than a former Republican congressman from Ohio who knew John Boehner, came up with John Boehner, and wrote about him. Congressman Bob Ney, welcome back to the program, Bob.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Thank you for joining us. I'm curious. I have read so much speculation. I've seen so many snarky comments, sad comments, happy comments, people speculating that the Pope got to him and he just couldn't, do what he knew was morally wrong anymore. I've heard comments that he's been, he chain smokes and drinks and he's 65 years old and his health isn't all that good and he thought it was time to go. I've heard comments that he just couldn't deal with the right wing in his party anymore. What's going on? Any sense of this?
Well, yes, Tom, there's a combination of a few things. And, I outlined in 2013 his leadership style, which matches exactly what's going on today. He was a guy that never liked confrontation. He was a guy never involved, barely, in the legislative process ever. He was a pure money guy and a guy that, liked to hang around with people and liked, the whole golf scene, et cetera, of Congress. And I mean,
so does that mean, Bob, does that mean that he got to be Speaker by being a really, really successful fundraiser who then redirected that money to other members of Congress so that they would vote for him the same way that people vote on behalf of legislation that lobbyists give them money for?
Oh, absolutely. He held the keys to the kingdom, the money. He could raise money. He was a prolific money raiser. After Tom DeLay left, he filled that vacuum as minority leader. No question about it, Tom. And then on top of it, he was a guy that, he liked to have some drinks. He could be kind of humorous, just one of those get-along guys. But he never was a lawmaker, like a lot of the rest of the members that were out there. And he never really liked confrontation. He kind of liked the easy path. So people thought, well, he'd be okay as a speaker. He can raise money, et cetera. But his leadership style's been sinking for a while. I mean, I'm shocked he hung on as long as he did. Now, everything he said, and I called some people at really in tune at the highest levels that are activists, et cetera, and it all seems to start matching. This was a negotiated deal, a couple of weeks ago with some people in the Freedom Caucus, as they call it. It's where Jim Jordan from Ohio and some other real conservative, the Tea Party members. And this was negotiated with a couple of people, not with the whole caucus, that he would leave. And if he didn't, they were going to bring that Meadows resolution, which was active at the desk. It was going to be brought up. Now, John Boehner's staff was telling people in the last week or so, hey, we can beat that. But they knew the votes were dropping, and they were doing private counts. So here's where the Pope does fit into this, not on a moral basis. The Pope fits into it because, Boehner wanted the Pope to come here. This is the third Pope he's tried. And so they negotiated a deal that he would not announce this until the Pope came because Boehner didn't want to be in the middle of a firestorm with the Pope coming. So they said, okay, you can go ahead and basically wait. But once the Pope comes and you see him, this has got to be announced. So they negotiated this deal with him. This isn't where he called them up, Tom, and said, hey, by the way, I'm just tired of all this nonsense. He didn't do that.
Was part of the deal that was negotiated that he would also leave the House of Representatives, or is he just like, hey, if I can't have the big office in the corner and the hours and the perks of being Speaker, screw it. I'm 65 years old. I'm out of here. I'm too old for I'm going to retire.
Well, there was a couple of things. They didn't, as I understand, they didn't negotiate that he had to leave. He could have stayed. He did that on his own for a couple of reasons. One, the ego, everything you mentioned. But on top of it, look, he has some horrific enemies within the Republican Party. And I'm not just talking about the conservative arm. There are some people within the party that absolutely loathed him, and people within the party across the United States. I think if he stepped down from his power base the way he has raised money, the brazen things he has done over the years, I think this could have come back, honestly, to haunt him. And I think he may, if he stayed, may have become, and I've been there and done it, may have become the center of many, many stories. Because, once you're out of that level, Katie bar the door, Tom. They'll go after you.
In other words, he has committed crimes, and his power, the power of his position, has prevented anybody from prosecuting him for those crimes, or even, frankly, mentioning them. And you document some of them in your book, and which was deafeningly ignored by the corporate media. That without the protection of the power of being speaker, just as a normal member like you were, that they may come after him.
Well, yes, and I don't think he wanted any part of that because, enemies are out there, opponents are out there, and once you're not in that seat of power, I can give you, Louise Slaughter, Congresswoman from New York, we had a bill, one time I went to Boehner directly, and I'm not the only one. If people would tell the truth, they would admit this. And I went to him and I said, listen, we have this, we want to make sure you don't use genetic testing against people for insurance purposes. And he turned to me and I said, I haven't had a hearing, John, and he was chairman of education at the time, and he said, look, our contributors don't like this, so I'm not doing it. I mean, that's how he'd answer you. This has been a pattern for years. Look, I'm an adult, I'm a big boy, people do certain things, but he was one of the most brazen human beings that were out there, especially with the tobacco companies and the pharmaceutical companies. So I think part of this is, I'm not saying he had a pending indictment over him. I think he did enough, Tom. He needed to just get out, period.
Yeah.
Once he's not speaker, that takes away. Look, a lot of people are afraid to go after the king.
Yeah, and that's fascinating too. That I've always said the modern Republican Party is basically made up of the billionaire corporate class. They're very well paid shills, and then all the suckers out there who vote for them. Based on distraction issues like abortion and things. And the fact that Boehner would just tell you, Bob, right to your face as a fellow Republican colleague, member of Congress, fellow representative from Ohio, hey, the donors don't want this, so it's not going to happen. Really, I mean, that's boy.
Well, he would tell you, or our friends, or tobacco companies. I mean, he was one of the most brazen members for years about that. At least with Gingrich and some others, they would actually talk some philosophy, or some feelings.
They would pretend there was ideology. Now, over at Politico, I believe this is Politico, they're suggesting that there are 4 people who will probably be the next Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy, who is a member of the caucus room conspiracy and is now the number 3 guy in the House of Representatives, or number 2. He's the Republican Majority Leader.
Sure.
Steve Scalise, the guy who ran for Congress as a more electable version of David Duke, who opposed making Martin Luther King Day a holiday in Louisiana. He's a climate denier and has refused to rule out impeaching President Obama. Jim Jordan, who is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. He wants more tax cuts for rich Americans. And wanted to overturn D.C.'s same-sex marriage law, and believes that America's founders wanted to prohibit abortion. And Jeb Hensarling, out of these 4, the second member of the caucus room conspiracy, the Republican from Texas, who previously chaired the House Republican Conference and the Conservative Republican Study Committee, and has called Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security cruel Ponzi schemes. Where are your bets?
Well, I would have to say, Scalise is probably going to go up the ladder, and I think Jim Jordan has a good chance to get up there. Now, look, Boehner allies want McCarthy.
Right, that's the conventional wisdom.
Period, they want McCarthy. However, either the Tea Party group, the Freedom Caucus, is either going to take McCarthy head on and try to stop him, or they're going to take consolations, and every other leader will be conservative, and some demands from McCarthy. He will do certain things. Boehner's problem was this. It wasn't that Boehner was passionate and, stood up for things. He went in the middle of the road, which is the worst place to have an accident. He just tried to, he told people, yeah, we're going to go after the president, and then he didn't, and then he told everybody everything. And so they're looking for somebody who's going to, take on the president. Now, what's fascinating about this, if they elect, let's say Jim Jordan, and they say, well, we're just going to shut the government down, we don't care, it's going to see whether the theory that the Tea Party had actually can work or not. Boehner just took it and went all over the place with it. So if Jim Jordan can't take that number 1 slot, I doubt Jeb Hensarling would be considered. But if Jordan can't take it, they have to make concessions. And even if they elect this, quote, moderate McCarthy, McCarthy's going to have to do what they say, or he's going to be next.
Yeah. Well, he was the one after, when they left the caucus room, conspiracy room meeting, who said, we're going to oppose Obama on every single piece of legislation, period.
Yeah, right.
So, no moderate there. Bob Ney, former Republican congressman from Ohio, now contributor to the Talk Radio News Service, author of the brilliant book, Sideswiped. Bob, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you.